So, you want to know something about what sort of a woman I am? Well, you shall have statistics free of charge. To begin, I'm about as dry as a pinch of snuff. Never very much to look at in my best days, and looking like a used-up article now. The general topic of remark upon meeting me seems to be that I'm not so bad-looking as they were afraid I was. I was the 7th child born to Lyman and Roxana Beecher. My mother died when I was 5 years old, but I remember her very well. She was an angel, quiet, serene, unselfish. I remember the way she would play the guitar and sing. She bore 9 children in 17 years and died of consumption at the age of 41. Although lost to us, she seemed to live again. All of us cherished her memory and carried it with us as a comforting warmth throughout our lives. My father was passionate, robust, and prone to great shifts in mood. He loved his family, petted us, and wanted the best for us. He often used to say that he wished I were a boy, that I was a genius and would do better than any of them. If I had been a boy, I would have been sent to college and ended up a minister like my 7 brothers. But as I was a girl, it was constantly impressed upon me a sense of personal insignificance, an absolute need for passive obedience. I was statedly washed, dressed, and catechized, got to school at regular hours, and to bed inflexibly at the earliest possible hour at night. I was a child in Litchfield, Connecticut. It was a beautiful place to grow up. And yet, the New England climate and temperament seems to cause a long withering of the soul's more ethereal part, a crushing out of the beautiful, which is horrible. Children are born there with a sense of beauty equally delicate with any in the world, but it dies a lingering death of smothered desire and starvation. I know, because I felt it. I used to escape through reading every book which came my way, and I often slipped into my own world of daydreams. My little brother Henry used to say, "There goes Harriet owling about." It is affecting to me to recall those things that strongly moved me years ago, when the occasion and emotion have wholly vanished from my mind. Those days when the mind lived only in eternity, and when my letters were never dated because they were only histories of the internal. But now that I am no more, and never can be young in this world, now that the friends of days past are almost all in eternity, what remains?
Thank you.
Sometimes I don't know as I'm fit for anything. I've often wished that I could die young and let the remembrance of me and my faults perish in the grave, rather than live as I fear I do, a trouble to everyone. You don't know how perfectly wretched I often feel, how weak, how useless, how destitute of all energy. Papa often tells me that I am a strange and inconsistent being. Sometimes I could not sleep, and have groaned and cried till midnight, while during the daytime I tried to appear cheerful, and succeeded so well that Papa reproved me for laughing so much. I'm so absent sometimes that I make strange mistakes, and then they all laugh at me. And I laugh too, although I feel as though I shall go distracted. I believe there never was a person more dependent upon the good and evil opinion of those around as I am. This desire to be loved forms, I fear, the great motive for all my actions. Most of my father's sermons are as unintelligible to me as if he spoke in Choctaw. But one Sunday, he spoke in direct, simple, and tender language of the great love of Christ and his care for the soul. He pictured him as patient with our errors, compassionate with our weaknesses, how he's ever near us, guiding our wanderings, comforting our sorrows, with a love unchilled by ingratitude, till at last he shall present us faultless before the throne of his glory with exceeding joy. I sat intent and absorbed. Oh, how much I needed just such a friend. Then the awful fact came over me that I had never had any conviction of my sin and therefore could not come to him. I longed to cry out, "I will," when Father made his passionate appeal. "Come then, and trust your soul to this faithful friend." Like a flash, it came over me that if I needed conviction of sin, he was able to give me even this also. I would trust him for the whole. My whole soul was illumined with joy, and as I left the church to walk home, it seemed to me as if nature herself were hushing her breath to hear the music of heaven. As soon as Father came home and was seated in his study, I went up to him and fell into his arms, saying, "Father, I have given myself to Jesus, and he has taken me." "Is it so?" he said, holding me silently to his heart. And I felt the hot tears fall on my head. Then has a new flower blossomed in the kingdom this day. We moved to Cincinnati when I was 21 so that Father could assume his position as president of the newly formed Lane Theological Seminary. The atmosphere of my father's household was replete with moral oxygen, full charged with intellectual electricity, a kind of moral heaven, the purity, vivacity, inspiration, and enthusiasm of which those only can appreciate who have lost it. It was at about this time that I began to participate more in society instead of simply observing. I'm trying to cultivate a general spirit of kindliness toward everybody, instead of shrinking into a corner to notice how other persons behave. I'm holding out my hand to the right and to the left and forming casual or incidental acquaintances. In this way, I find society full of interest and pleasure, a pleasure which pleases me more because it's not old and worn out. From these friendships, I expect little, therefore generally receive more than I expect. The kind words, looks, and smiles that I call forth by looking and smiling are not much by themselves, but They form a very pretty flower border to the way of life. This kind of pleasure and acquaintanceship is new to me. When I used to meet other persons, the first inquiry was, have they such and such a character, or have they anything that might possibly be of use or harm to me? I worked as principal assistant to my older sister, Catherine, in the female college she had started in Cincinnati. Every Monday evening at 7:30 o'clock, we meet with the other members of the Semicolon Club. Now, you know that in Spanish, Columbus is called colon. Now, he who discovers a new pleasure is certainly half as great as he who discovers a new continent. Therefore, if Colon discovered a new continent, then we, who have discovered in this club a new pleasure, ought at least be entitled to the name of semicolons. We elect a reader for the evening, and then listen to the literary pieces which have been contributed for the evening. Thank goodness these can be signed or anonymous. We then discuss the work and relax with refreshments. It's a protected environment where my little stories can receive constructive criticism. It was at the Semicolon Club that I got to know Calvin E. Stowe and his wife, Eliza. Eliza had a most interesting simplicity and timidity of manner. She was a lovely woman with hazel eyes and auburn hair. I fell in love with her directly. A cholera epidemic took her away from Calvin and me, and our shared sorrow bound us together. It is scarcely well to love friends thus. The greater part that I see cannot move me deeply. They're present and I enjoy them. They pass and I forget them. But those that I love differently, those that I love, and oh, how much the word means, I feel sadly about them. They may change. They must die. They're separated from me. And I ask myself, why should I wish to love with all the pains and penalties of such condition? I check myself when expressing feelings like this, but it is so deeply, so sincerely so in me, that sometimes it will overflow. Well, there is a heaven and a world of love, and love, after all, is the existence, the lifeblood, the all in all of mind. Dear Harriet, I longed to be with you so yesterday afternoon that it seemed as if my heart would break. It was just one of those days in which I used to be happiest with Eliza. So still, so calm, so soothing, so delightful. But now such days are for me indescribably lonely and full of melancholy. Then I want Eliza. I involuntarily reach out my arms for her and draw my breath short and quick and almost faint when the truth forces itself upon me that in this world I must see her no more. Then I want you to be with me and feel that if you could be near me, I might be happy yet. I should conjecture that you have had friends in days past to whom you have given your full and constant heart, and had the mortification to see them, as the Bible expresses it, glide away like the deceitful brook. You must never allow any such feeling to interrupt the freedom and pleasure of your confidence in me. I am not changeable. Where my mind once fixes itself, there it always remains. My affection for you is no sudden caprice, and no sudden caprice can change it. It is of slow and natural growth, and true to its object is the needle to the polar star. I wait with earnestness for the next opportunity of seeing and talking with you. The few talks I have done me a world of good. I feel quiet, resigned, and thankful. I have been given me a sister's love to fill up in some degree the aching void in my heart. You have done what only woman can do. I am under obligations to you which will never cease, nor be forgotten while I live in this world. And dear Harriet, now I kiss you and say goodbye. Affectionately yours, Calvin E. Stowe. Oh. Well, my dear Georgiana, about half an hour more, and your old friend, companion, schoolmate, sister, and so forth, will cease to be Hattie Beecher and change into nobody knows who. Well, my dear, you were engaged and pledged in a year or two to encounter a similar fate. And do you wish to know how you shall feel? Well, my dear, I have been dreading and dreading the time, and lying awake all last week, wondering how I should live through this overwhelming crisis. And lo, it has come, and I feel nothing at all. Well, it really is a mercy to have this entire stupidity come over one at such a time. I should be crazy to feel as I did last week, or indeed to feel anything at all. But I inwardly vowed that my last feelings and reflections on the subject should be yours. And as I've not got any, it's just as well to tell you that. Well, here comes Mr. Stowe. So farewell. And for the last time, I subscribe your own Hattie Elizabeth Beecher. I was married when I was 25 to a man rich in Greek and Hebrew and Latin and Arabic, and alas, rich in nothing else. And yet we are as domestic as any pair of tame fowl you ever saw. The wonder to me is how this momentous crisis in the life of such a wisp of nerve as myself can have been transacted so quietly. I'm tranquil, quiet, and happy. I look only on the present and leave the future to him who has hitherto been so kind to me. 4 months after our marriage, Calvin was sent to Europe to buy books for the Lane Seminary Library and to lecture on the subject of public education in the United States. I wished I were a man in his place. I wouldn't have had a grand time. Dear Harriet, when it is pleasant, so that you can, visit dear Eliza's grave every day between 11 and 12, and on Wednesdays a little before 11. She died on Wednesday at 10 minutes before 11. My spirit is always there at that hour. Write me always and tell me just how the grave looks and how the plants grow. I like it to look wild and somewhat like nature, but if you and Henry think that little things ought to be done, I leave it to your discretion to do them. Write me once a week, and I shall do the same to you. Goodbye, dear wife. Calvin E. Stowe. There are griefs which grow with years. These are not events, but slow perceptions of disappointment, which bear down on the heart with the weight of the atmosphere. And these things are never named nor counted in words in life's sorrows, the persons never owning to themselves the weight of the pressure. Then are persons brought into near contact by the relations of life and bound to each other by a love so close as to be perfectly indispensable to each other, who yet act upon each other as a file upon a diamond, by a gradual friction, the pain of which is constantly diffused through life, as scarcely ever at any time to force itself upon the mind as a reality. Well, my dear Georgiana, I am but a drudge with few ideas beyond babies and housekeeping. As for thoughts, reflections, and sentiments, good lack. Everybody says that we have not had so severe a winter for 15 years. I was bred to such harshness from the cradle, and so I did not miss it. But the children feel it. Nevertheless, if I could afford to warm every room, I would not do it, for I'm sure it is better to sleep in cold rooms. Well, Georgie, this marriage is... Yes, I will speak well of it after all, for when I can stop and think, I must say that I am a fortunate woman in both husband and children. My children I would not change for all the ease, leisure, and pleasure I could have without them. I was the mother of 3 children within 2 years. I shall not have any more children for some time. I'm quite confident about this. As it is, I find that I do not fulfill my own expectations of what a mother should be and accomplish for her children. It seems to me that other women are able to affect an air of calm serenity in their homes which is entirely absent in my own. How should I fare with still more children to care for, with a husband who's often away from home, even if I should survive the childbirth? I wish to live to see my children grow into adulthood. It is almost, in fact, 18 months since I have had a wife to sleep with me. It is enough to kill any man, especially such a man as I am. My arms and bosom are hungry even to starvation, to lie on the same pillow with you, your face pressed to mine and our bare bosoms together. If I could just step into your bedroom and take that place in your arms, to which I alone, of all men in the world, ever have a right or ever received admission. It is a mean business of sleeping in another bed, another room, and even another house, and being with you as if you were a withered up, old maid sister instead of the wife of my bosom. Of all contemptible things, the most unutterably intolerable is having the love of marriage and denying the power thereof. I do not even fulfill Calvin's expectations of a wife. How I long to surrender my emotions utterly to him, to embrace him with abandon, and without fearing conception. I regret that I do not love and never can love with the blind and unwise love with which I married. I've made up my mind to secure the requisite hours of sleep and 2 hours of exercise in the open air, and an hour or two every day in which I shall have nothing to do but rest and amuse myself. A woman's lot. And what is that, pray? To sit with folded hands and see life drifting by? To be a mere nullity? And endure to have my good friends pat me on the back and think that I am a bright and shining light of contentment in woman's sphere. My fate will not be determined by a man who wants a wife as he does a cooking stove. In our days, much has been said of the importance of training women to be wives. Is there not something to be said of the importance of training men to be husbands? I shall speak for those whose lives burn themselves out into white ashes in silence and repression. The cholera epidemics were something to which one almost became accustomed living in Cincinnati. But the deaths which resulted from the plague were nonetheless horrifying. Cholera had claimed the life of Eliza, Calvin's first wife, and my closest and dearest friend. And now it selfishly asked for more. Oh, my dear husband, at last it's over, and our dear little one is gone from us. Oh, my Charlie, my beautiful, loving, gladsome baby, so full of life and hope and strength, now lies shrouded, pale and cold in the room below. Never was he anything to me but a comfort. Many an anxious night have I held him to my bosom and felt the sorrow and loneliness pass out of me at the touch of his warm little hands. Yet I have just seen him in his death agony, and I could not help, nor soothe, nor do one thing. Not one. Do nothing but pray in my anguish that he might die soon. I write as though my sorrow were the only sorrow. Yet there has been in this town, as in the land of Egypt, scarce a house without its dead. This heartbreak, this anguish has been everywhere. And when it will end, God alone knows. You must not expect very much writing from me, for it drains me of all my strength to care for and provide for all these 7 children, to try to cure the faults of all, harmonize all. Alas, it's too much for me. And an aching head and heart often show it. But my husband urged me on. My dear, you must be a literary woman. It's so written in the book of fate. Make all your calculations accordingly. Get a good stock of health and brush up your mind. Drop the E out of your name. It only encumbers it and interferes with the flow and euphony. Write yourself only and always Harriet Beecher Stowe. I hold to women's rights to this extent, that a woman's own native name never ought to die out and be merged in the name of any man whatever. So, if you see my name coming out everywhere, you may be sure of one thing, that I do it for the pay. I've determined not to be a mere domestic slave. I've received $40 for some writing. Calvin says that he shall leave me to use it for my own personal gratification. As if a wife and mother had any gratification apart from family interests. Calvin says that my best writing is about the persons I've known. He says that my strength as a writer comes from my readers identifying the characters in my stories as persons with whom they can sympathize. Uncle Tom's Cabin was published in a periodical, the National Era, and each installment was enthusiastically anticipated by households across the country. The issue of slavery became a topic of conversation. President Lincoln may have attributed the start of the war to me, but I must confess that Uncle Tom's Cabin was conceived in a vision which I witnessed at the little church in Brunswick, Maine, on a communion Sunday. I simply recorded what I saw. Well, Tom, said Legree, stepping forward and seizing him grimly by the collar of his coat. Do you know I've made up my mind to kill you? It's very likely, Master, said Tom calmly. I have, said Legree, with terrible grim calming, done just that thing, Tom, unless you tell me what you know about these here gals. Tom was silent. Do you hear, said Legree, speak. I ain't got nothing to tell. Do you mean to tell me, you old black Christian, that you don't know? Tom was silent. Speak, thundered Legree, striking him furiously. Do you know anything? I know, but I can't tell anything. I can die. Legree, approaching his face almost to Tom, said in a terrible voice, You've always stood it out agin me. Now I'll conquer you, or I'll kill you. I'll count every drop of blood there is in you and take 'em one by one until you give up. Tom looked to his master and answered, Massa, if you was sick, or in trouble, or dying, and I could save you, I'd give you my heart's blood. And if taking every drop of blood in this poor old body would save your precious soul, I'd give him freely, as the Lord gave his for me. Oh, Massa, don't bring this great sin on your soul. 'Twill hurt you worse than it will me. Do the worst you can, my troubles I'll be over soon. But if you don't repent, yours won't never end. Legree stood aghast and looked at Tom. And there was such a silence that the tick of the old clock could be heard, measuring with silent touch the last moments of mercy and probation to that hardened heart. It was but a moment. There was one hesitating pause, one irresolute, relenting thrill, and the spirit of evil came back with sevenfold vehemence, and Legree, foaming with rage, smote his victim to the ground. Scenes of blood and cruelty are shocking to our ear and heart. What man has nerve to do, man has not nerve to bear. What brother man and brother Christian must suffer cannot be told to us even in our silent chamber. It so harrows up the soul. And yet, oh my country, these things are done under the shadow of thy laws. Oh, Christ, thy church sees them almost in silence. But of old, there was one whose suffering changed an instrument of torture and degradation and shame into a symbol of glory and honor and eternal life. And where his spirit is, neither degrading stripes, nor blood, nor insults can make the Christian's last struggle less than glorious. Pay away till he give up. Give it to him. Give it to him, shouted Legree. I'll count every drop of blood he has until he confess. Tom opened his eyes and looked upon his master. You poor miserable critter. There ain't no more you can do. I forgive you with all my soul. And he fainted entirely away. I believe my soul, he's done for finally, said Legree, stepping forward to look at him. Yes, he is. Well, his mouth's shut up at last. That's one comfort. I shall speak for those whose lives burn themselves out into white ashes in silence and repression. Dear Harriet, one word you used in one of your letters a long time ago has lain on my mind in a sort of grieved, sorrowful way ever since. You ask why I reproach you, and say you never reproach me. It is very true that you never do, that you are always most forbearing and magnanimous, and it is never in my heart to reproach you. No feeling I have ever had deserves that word, yet I doubt not my language may fully justify your use of it. It is always in my intention and desire a reformatory effort, however awkward and incongruous the attempt may in reality be. It is one of the many things that I have to feel sorry for and ashamed of, that I do these things no better. You must take into consideration your celebrity and my obscurity, and the fact that I have ambitions as well as other people. And if my love for you were not very deep and sincere and wholehearted, our relative positions, acting upon my sensitive, irritable, and hypochondriac nature, might be productive of still more offensive and painful results. We must do as well as we can till this corruptible shall have put on incorruption. As to your work, your best book is yet to be written. Neither Uncle Tom nor Dread shows all your capabilities. You must next take some old town subject. Plan it very deliberately and carefully, and take plenty of time to write it. Lovingly yours, Calvin E. Stowe. Old town folks. Now, I've heard some of these here modern ministers. They say there ain't no devil. And the reason on it's because there can't be none. These here fellas is also sort of green. If they'd have known old Black Hoss John, they'd have been pretty sure there was a devil. He was just the meanest, ugliest critter you ever did see. And he was ugly just for the sake of ugliness. He grudged every critter everything. And if he'd have had his way, every bird would have fell down dead that picked up a worm on his grounds. Well, old Black Hoss had a special spot again for old Sarah. Said she was an old witch and an old thief when everybody knew she was a regular church member, and as decent a critter as there was going. Now, as to her stealing, she didn't do nothing but pick huckleberries and get chestnuts and walnuts and them there wild things that's the Lord's grow on whose land they will and is free to all. Well, old Black Hoss, he knowed the law was so, and he couldn't do nothing agin her by law, but he sarved her every mean trick he could think of. And he thought he'd try and frighten her off in the ground by making on her believe he was the devil. So, one day, when they'd been killing a beef critter, they took off the skin, horns and all. You see, 'twas a moonlight night, and old Sarah, she was an industrious critter. She was picking white birch brush for brooms down in the pasture lot. Well, old Black Hoss, he took the critter skin around his shoulders with the horns on his head and begun to roar and make noise. Old Sarah, she just kept right on working and just let him roar. Old Black Hoss, he felt pretty foolish, so he calls out in a grum voice, "Woman, don't you know who I be?" "No," says she real quiet like, "I don't know who you be." "Well, I'm the devil." "You be? Poor old critter, how I pity you." And she never give him another word but just bundled up her broom stuff and took it on her back and walked off. Well, you see there, boys? That is just the way you treat the devil. You just keep straight on with what you're doing and don't you mind him, and he can't do nothing to you. It is not fame nor praise that contents me. I seem never to have needed love so much as I do now. I long to hear you say how much you love me. Dear Harriet, I have such a noble wife, gifted with such splendid powers, and disposed to make such a use of them that all future generations will call her blessed. I thank God he has given me a female friend to whom I can open my heart. I must be within reach of woman's love, or my own feelings will suffocate me. It is late. Good night, and may God bless you. My dear sister, Calvin E. Stowe. Ours is an intimate friendship. What the French call camaraderie is the healthiest and best cement. There are 1,000 favorite subjects on which I could talk with you better than with anybody. If you were not already my own dearly loved husband, I should certainly fall in love with you. My dear friends, I'm passing the last days of my life in the city where I passed my schoolgirl days. My physical health has been excellent. I'm nearly always cheerful and happy. My mental condition might be described as nomadic. I have no fixed thoughts or objects. I wander at will from one subject to another. In pleasant summer weather, I'm almost always out of doors, rambling about the neighborhood, calling upon my friends. One day, my neighbor Mark Twain came to call without his hat and wearing his slippers. Well, evidently, when he returned home, his wife Olivia, reprimanded him for not being appropriately dressed. He then sent over the neglected items with a note which read, "May not a man in extremes send his hat and boots to call?" To which I replied, "You have discovered a principle. You probably don't know it, as didn't Sir Isaac Newton when the apple fell, but you have. You have discovered that a man may call by installments. Allow me to thank you for the prolonged pleasure." I do not read much. Every now and then I dip into the heart of a book, much as a hummingbird, poised in air on whirring wing, darts into the heart of a flower, now here, now there, then away. Pictures delight me and afford me infinite diversion. I pass many pleasant hours looking over books of pictures. Of music also I'm very fond. I could not have enough of it. And I never do have as much as I should like. I make no mental effort of any kind. My brain's tired out. It was a woman's brain, and not a man's brain. And finally, from sheer fatigue and exhaustion, it gave out before the end was reached. And now I rest me like a moored boat, rising and falling in the water, with loosened cordage and flapping sail. Blessed I have been in many ways, in seeing many of my desires fulfilled, and in having the love of many people. Sorrows also I've had, which have left their mark on my heart and brain. But they're all past now. I've come to heaven's borderland, from whence we can see into the gates of the celestial city. Even now, all tears are wiped from my eyes. I am most sincerely your friend, Harriet Beecher Stowe.